New York will never forgive Geno Smith. It's a wrap.
Geno Smith out 6 to 10 weeks with a broken jaw as a result of a sucker punch by one of his own teammates.
Smith fires, end zone. That's a Seahawks touchdown.
I'm leaning Geno Smith, and now he's one of the best quarterbacks in football.
He hasn't played in forever. As much as some of the guys on the list, I got respect for what they did. Geno wins it.
Don't call it a comeback.
Geno Smith has proven so many of us wrong.
Yes, indeed. Halfway through the season, the Comeback Player of the Year race is one of the most interesting conversations going. You got CMC up in San Francisco, Saquon and Danny Dimes in New York, but right now, Geno's the guy. Even when he loses, whether it's stateside or over in Deutschland, he's putting up big-time performances, dare I say elite. And he has the Seahawks in playoff contention as they go into their bye.
More than playoff contention, he might get some MVP votes if he keeps this comeback up. Also, the Vikings are the comeback kings after this crazy win over Buffalo, a great UFC comeback and a massive title fight, and Pete Rose on a last-shot comeback to revive his Hall of Fame chances. From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier.
And I'm Dave Dameshek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Shek, let's get into this Geno comeback.
Hey, if you dream of Geno, your wish is my command. Let's get into it indeed. Geno Smith, he started his career with disappointment. As you may recall, he was supposed to be a high first-round pick in 2013, but he fell to the Jets on day 2, and frankly, kind of showed why he did with only a few flashes early on in New York. Then a dreadful run of losses in 2014 and an infamous fight with a teammate right before the start of the 2015 season derailed his Jets career.
Opportunities don't come often in this league, and you're starting to run out of opportunities for a guy like Geno Smith going into his 3rd season. This is a devastating blow here for the progression of the Jets quarterback.
Geno, of course, then missed several weeks with that broken jaw and lost the trust of the team. Shazier, that's hard to come back from, right?
Yeah, you can't get punched by your teammates.
So that's when Ryan Fitzpatrick makes the scene. He jumps into the breach, took the starting job, and pushed Geno to the bench before Smith's Jets career ended permanently with a major knee injury. Geno's next chance was as Eli Manning's backup for the Gents, and nobody believed in him when he finally got his chance to start again.
Geno Smith? Geno Smith is the guy you start when you don't have a franchise quarterback.
So fast forward, after years of riding the bench for a few teams, Geno landed in Seattle and at age 32 had a shot to start heading into this season. Shazier, goes without saying, we were all quite surprised.
Yeah, I don't think nobody's seen this one coming.
I mean, I think even Pete Carroll thought Drew Lock was going to get the gig. Most pundits assumed Geno at QB meant that Seattle would be at the bottom of the league and drafting a QB number 1 in the draft. In fact, cynics thought it meant the Seahawks were trying to lose games.
I think they're going to be picking number 1 overall, and they're going to be taking either C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, 1st overall. That's my prediction.
Apparently, though, Geno didn't get the memo. His comeback season started week 1 when he beat the Seahawks' old QB, Russell Wilson, then gave the soundbite of the year.
They wrote me off. I ain't right back, though. That's the problem. I ain't right back. Let's go.
And now Geno is top 5 in pass yards, touchdowns, and passer rating. He has the Seahawks in playoff contention and is the leading candidate for Comeback Player of the Year.
I think Geno Smith is the runaway winner for Comeback Player of the Year. He's done a fantastic job.
And topping all that, he's Ryan Shazier's QB1 in fantasy.
Yeah, he's definitely my fantasy QB. For more on Geno's comeback, time to welcome Jody Mack, CBS's national radio host, who covers Geno since his early years at the Jets. Thank you so much, Jody.
Guys, thanks for inviting me. Love the format, love your mindset. And yeah, Geno Smith fits what you guys are trying to do. Talk about comebacks. Guilty as charged. I didn't think Geno was ever going to be a starting quarterback in the league again, but he has been phenomenal for the Seahawks all year long. He has done a phenomenal job as a comeback kid for the Seahawks this year.
Yeah, this is something that nobody expected, especially me. He's my quarterback in fantasy now. He didn't start off as my quarterback in fantasy, but he's my quarterback at fantasy now, and he's been getting me what I expect every single week. Let's get back to the beginning. What were the expectations for Geno when he first came to New York?
Pretty optimistic. The fact that the Jets were able to get him on day 2 rather than day 1. It wasn't a great fantasy or regular quarterback draft that year. And the Jets got one of what they believe was the best quarterbacks coming out. So they were ready, willing, and able to give him a shot to take the job. He got the job. He didn't play all that well, as you pointed out at the top. He gets into the fight with the teammate, which just doomed his Jet career thereafter. I knew it was over as soon as that came down. And, there was a lot of blame to go around, but a good part of it was on Geno himself. And, it just wasn't going to work with the Jets, which was a major disappointment because Jet fans started to believe in the guy, said we got like second-round pick, and we've got ourselves a starting quarterback. Off the numbers he put up at West Virginia, people thought the sky was the limit. He just wasn't as good as they thought he was going to be. I always thought it was learning the speed of the game. That the speed of the game seemed too much for Geno, that he was just a step behind. In West Virginia, they got receivers running wide open. He's got the arm strength. He's got the talent. He can deliver the football, but it gets a hell of a lot tougher when you get to the NFL. And Geno just didn't make that step of progression that I thought he needed to.
I do feel like he's a little bit from the Simpsons sideshow Bob, whether he means to or not. He just keeps stepping on rakes and they keep hitting him in the face. A teammate hit him in the face, though, and broke his jaw. Get into that. I'm a little murky on what the details were at the time of that because, like Shazier says, you can't come back into the locker room after you get knocked out by one of your teammates. He breaks your jaw, leader of men, all that kind of stuff. Talk about what went down in the Jets locker room, specifically with Geno when his jaw got broken like that.
I will be 100% truthful with you guys. I still don't know the real story because as with most fracases and things like that, there's one side, there's the other side, and the truth is somewhere there in the middle. And I don't know that we ever actually got to the complete and honest truth, but it had to do with money. It had to do with a guy making an appearance at a camp and getting paid, and Geno not holding up his end of the bargain, and according to his teammate, and according to Geno, that the player blatantly overreacted, which I would agree. For what they were arguing over, I don't think he deserved to be punched, but I wasn't in the locker room that day, so I don't know what words went back and forth between the two guys. But yeah, that's never a good sign when your starting quarterback gets punched out by one of his teammates. You got to go out there and take the slings and arrows of all these other teams' defenses trying to kill a quarterback. When your teammate is trying to kill you, that's not a good sign. And yeah, at that point, he lost the locker room. Ryan can attest to that. That if you can't keep your teammate from getting so incensed that he punches you, how can you actually be the leader of men and be the starting quarterback of a team? So that to me signified the end of the Geno Smith era with the Jets. And he hadn't done enough. Like if a teammate took a poke at Patrick Mahomes today in the Kansas City locker room, guess what? The Chiefs aren't moving off Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is going to stay the starting quarterback of the Chiefs. Geno Smith was not in that type of position, hadn't done enough, hadn't accomplished enough. And when you lose a locker room like that, it is over.
Yeah, Jody, one thing I'm going to tell you right now is not one person in Kansas City that's going to touch Patrick Mahomes. I can tell you that right now. And like I do agree with you. When you're a leader of men, when you're a quarterback of a team, and you get punched in front of your teammates, it definitely drops the value of your leadership because most leaders, when you're looking up to them, the people that are following you, they don't even think about, hey, I'm going to take this route of violence. I'm going to take this route of understanding, of talking to my leader like that. So I don't understand what was said. I don't understand what was done, but I think that's something that he probably definitely worked on to allow him to be the leader that he is now. He actually won the job back for Ryan Fitzpatrick, but then tearing his ACL. Did anybody expect that he would still be in the league to this point after he left the Jets?
I didn't. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Because he had a skill level and he had talent and could do some things, I thought there would be teams that would be very willing and able to keep Geno around as a backup. And Seattle is, of course, one of them. And I thought, well, it's not a bad gig. Being a backup quarterback in the NFL, not a bad gig. Stand there, make good money, wear a hat, carry a clipboard. Everybody say, oh, yeah, let's get him into the game. You're like one of the more popular players on the team, especially if the quarterback is having his struggles and his issues. So I thought Geno could stick around as a backup. Not a starter. I didn't think Geno was ever going to be a starter in the league again.
Don't call it a comeback.
And by the way, yes, as you say, it's a great gig to have, being a backup, not taking those shots and everything else. And he finds a nice cozy spot. Probably doesn't even have to move. He goes from the Jets to the Giants. He's Eli's backup. He's probably not going to see much action, but then things are a little weird for Eli. The team's not playing great. And then McAdoo makes the wild choice to put Geno in. Great. So give the backup. Everybody always says, who's the most popular guy in any football town? The backup QB, except here, because it ends Eli Manning's Iron Man streak, and poor Geno is again in the crosshairs of the fan base. How did that weird situation affect our perception of Geno at that spot in the middle of his career?
At the time, I was doing regular weekend work on WFAN in New York. So I was on almost every single Saturday, leading into every Giants Sunday game. And here was the weird thing about it. This is just my perception as a guy taking calls from Giant fans every single week. Most Giant fans were killing Eli Manning. And Manning was having a bad year. And the Giants weren't playing well. And Giant fans expect more from their starting quarterback. As I was watching the Giants week in and week out, I was going, yeah, Eli's not getting it done, but their line is Swiss cheese. He's getting crushed on a week in, week out basis. I'm saying pick the best quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, whoever you want. You bring him in here, guess what? They're not going to move the football either because they're going to get killed. How do you leave this at Eli's doorstep? Well, you can't swap out an entire offensive line, but you can change a quarterback. So McAdoo decided, let me get a little drastic and let me do this. He so misinterpreted the fallout that Eli Manning did have that unbelievable Iron Man streak going. And while he was taking some grief from a percentage of the Giant fans, there were some that were just stone cold loyal to him. And oh, by the way, who are you going to take Eli Manning out of the lineup for? The Jet reject Geno Smith? You're going to put Geno Smith in to replace this guy who started this many games in a row? I talk about when I told you when the fight happened with the Jets, I really thought that was the end of Geno's era in Jetland. Oh, the day McAdoo said that Eli Manning is going to be it's going to be on the bench and Geno's going to be the starting quarterback. That was it for McAdoo. He was no longer going to be the Giant coach. There was no way he was extending past that. With his arm probably, and again, don't know this, but believe this, arm completely twisted behind his back. Oh, yeah, Eli's going back in next week. Geno was a victim of circumstances. And to his credit, and he showed me something, handled it as a professional. When he got named the quarterback, he said all the right things. When he got replaced the week after, said all the right things. I said, well, at least Geno has grown up a lot from the time when he first came into the league with the Jets. He'd become a professional. He understood the business. He understood the fact that you're not promised anything. And even though his Giant career was just that 1 year, basically that one game, the fact that he went out of his way to mention McAdoo and Dave Gettleman when he beat the Giants with Seattle just a couple of weeks ago tells you, yeah, he learned a lesson with the Giants, that there's a lot of things to be in a professional in the National Football League. And I think you see that in his play with the Seahawks, that it's paying dividends for him big time right now.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think a lot of fans also don't understand that McAdoo was on the hot seat. So when you're in a hot seat and your team's not doing good, now you're just throwing, stuff in the pot. I'm just trying to make something happen. And unfortunately, Geno Smith was in the situation of making something happen. And it didn't work out how he wanted to. He ended up losing his job. Geno ended up losing his job the next week. But Geno still appreciate, hey, you gave me a chance. why a lot of people wouldn't give me a chance, and that's why he thanked them. But let's fast forward to being at the Seahawks. Everybody, including me, including Dave, and pretty much everybody that's in Seattle thought this was a rebuild season for the Seahawks. They named Geno the quarterback. You see all these talented quarterbacks in the draft. You know, you have C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. You know, you have all these wonderful quarterbacks that's coming out in the draft. And everybody thought this was a rebuild season. Like, what has he done to prove everybody wrong so far to make this team the leaders of the division?
A couple of things. Number one, again, I think I said it earlier, paint me as knowing nothing, because number one, I didn't think Geno was going to win a job. I thought Drew Lock was going to. So I'm going, all right, he stays as the backup quarterback. To the credit of the head coach, that I was right. I was wrong about whether Geno could play or not, but I was right about Pete Carroll. So many people said, oh, if they trade Russell Wilson, Pete's going to walk away. I never believed that. Pete Carroll is still very gung-ho about coaching in the National Football League. Every time I saw him during the offseason, he's one of the oldest coaches in the NFL. He acts like one of the youngest coaches in the NFL. Them vigor, excitement. Man, did he sell me on the fact that the Seahawks were going to try and win this year. So I was never buying that Pete Carroll was going to step away. And to his credit, he said, I'm good with either of these two quarterbacks. If Lock wins a job, we'll win with Drew Lock. If Geno wins a job, we'll win with Geno. I wasn't sure he was right. I thought that might have been a little hyperbole, but damn, he was right. And Geno has done the job. So kudos to Pete Carroll for, number one, speaking his mind. Number two, giving us what he believed to be the truth. And then proven right by Geno Smith being as good as he's been. And again, I'm not out there every single day. I don't see the Seahawks practices. I see them play on Sundays. I think it's a question of maturity. I think that Geno Smith, from the time he was drafted out of West Virginia, went in, was supposed to be the savior with the Jets, had that funky one-year stopover with the Giants. He's grown up. And he has taken his job seriously. And a lot of times when you're the backup quarterback, you can learn a lot. You're in every single meeting. You see what's going on. You don't have to take the slings and arrows of the other team's defense, but you can learn from it. And I think he's learned tremendously over the years, and that's why he's in the position to be a good quarterback for the Seahawks this year. I didn't know if it was going to happen, but you got to give the guy credit. He's, for me, the unquestioned comeback player of the year in the NFL.
We're more than halfway through the season at this point, and people have invoked the names like Alex Smith. I go Jim Plunkett. I mean, the late stage, this has been a real slow burn, Jim Plunkett, for younger people like 5-0 Shazier. Plunkett is the first overall pick coming out of Stanford, can't miss guy, but then he misses in 2 stops until he lands in Oakland and then wins a couple of Super Bowls with them. Listen, Pete Carroll is known for his optimism. I don't think Pete Carroll saw this season coming. I assume he thought this was a bridge year like the rest of us. How far can Geno take this thing? But more, not just the rest of this season, but in 2023, has he succeeded to the point that the Seahawks are going to let him walk because they are presumably looking to the future? Do you think they retain Geno this offseason, that they ink him to a bridge deal, a year or 2, tag him potentially? How say you?
I think Ryan mentioned it earlier that this is supposed to be a very good quarterback class for the college guys coming into the pros this year. I believe that at the start of the season. I'm on both days on the weekend on CBS Sports Radio and Saturday nights. So I spend all day Saturday watching college football. You got Bryce Young, you got C.J. Stroud, and then for me, you've got this massive, and I'm using that word, massive drop-off to every other quarterback who's available in this year's draft. I think Brian said Will Levis. He stinks. He's just been flat out bad for Kentucky this year. 3 quarterbacks could go 1, 2, 3 in the draft. Will Levis doesn't belong at number 3 or 10 or 20 or anywhere in the first round. I think he looks like a 3rd round pick to me. So if you've got a chance to get a Bryce Young or a C.J. Stroud, I think you're going to take it. Well, guess what? The Seahawks are not going to be in position to get that kind of a player because they're going to win double-digit games. They're going to go down to the wire with San Francisco to win that division. So they're not talking about drafting. I talked about them drafting at the top of the draft before the season started. Wrong. They're not going to have a high first-round pick. And if you're going to use the 21st pick in the draft on Will Levis, I can tell you right now, Geno Smith's going to be a better quarterback than him next year. So they better keep Geno around if they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round whose name is not either Young or Stroud, because I don't think it's a very good quarterback.
But Jody,
draft.
don't forget the ultimate irony. In return for giving up Russell Wilson, they get Denver's first-round pick, and the Broncos stink too. So you might have a shot at that guy. It will be very interesting to see what they do next year. But in the meantime, there's the rest of the season to deal with.
I think that if you're asking me if I were advising the Seahawks what to do, I think you just stick with Geno. He's done enough this year. Now, we still got 8 games to go, and who knows, he could go backwards. I think Geno has done enough this year that you say, all right, this is not the year we're going to make the move for the quarterback. A whole bunch of chips have to line themselves up. You're right, that Denver pick could be pretty damn high. A lot of things have to be determined over the second half of the year. But if you're saying make that decision today, do they just thank Geno for the memories after one really good year and move on? Not me. I'm giving him another shot. This is not a flash in the pan. This isn't 2 games or 4 games. This is a half a season that Geno's been this good. I want to bring him back as my quarterback. Again, don't want to overstay. Geno going to do it for a decade going on from here? I don't think so. But for short term, next couple of years, I got no problems with Geno Smith being my starting quarterback.
Jody, so with Geno having a season like this, having a comeback, obviously this is a comeback, and the Seahawks are the number 1 in their division right now. Would you take being number 1 in your division right now, or would you take the number 1 pick?
Number 1 overall pick?
Yeah. Which one would you prefer?
If you're offering me either Young or Stroud, well, yeah, I'm going to bite because you're going to get him for cheap. You're going to have him for 5 years before you really have to pay him. I think both are going to be franchise quarterbacks. Yes. If you're telling me I can have Geno Smith or any other quarterback not named Young or Stroud, I'm sticking with Geno.
Hey, awesome stuff, Jody Mack. Thank you so much for joining us here. By the way, a lot of the conversation we just had around Geno Smith and whether or not he comes back in 2023 also applies to the guy you were watching there in New York, Danny Dimes. We'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on that on CBS Sports Radio and WFAN in New York. Thanks again, Jody.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for inviting me. Enjoy the show.
Don't call it a comeback.
It's time for some other great comeback stories in the news we need to take a look at and talk about here. It is time for the check down. All right, here we go, 5-0. The Vikes might as well change their name to the Comeback Kids. This is what a lot of people are calling them. Okay, they've pulled off some miracles in the fourth quarter, but not against high-end competition necessarily, at least until this past Sunday, when they rallied from a big deficit against Josh Allen in overtime to beat the Bills and improve to 8-1. 8-1 is no jive there, Shazier. Are the Vikes for real, or are they just getting lucky to this point?
So the Vikings, they beat the Dolphins, but without Tua. So the Dolphins are 7-0 with Tua when he plays the whole game. They beat the Bills in overtime in Buffalo. They lost to the Eagles, who's the hottest team in football right now. And next week they have the Cowboys, so which is a very tough matchup. And they have 5 comebacks in a row. So they're definitely the comeback kids. But I don't know yet. Like I think obviously they're one of the best teams in the NFL. You play against, anybody in the NFL any given Sunday. If you're 8-1, that means you're one of the best teams in the league. So I think they're real, but I don't think they're real enough to win the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles are better than them. I think the Bills, if the Bills play them again, I don't think that they're going to come back from 17 now. I don't see it happening. But I think they're a good team. I think they're a solid team. I think that they're good enough to make a very far run. I can see them in the NFC Championship. But I think this week versus the Cowboys is going to be a real test because the Cowboys have the number 1 defense in the league. And then when Tony Pollard and Zeke are on the same page, man, the Cowboys are really hard to stop. So I think after next week, I'm going to see how, after this week, I'm going to see how they play. And then I can give you a real option. So come back to me next week on the check down.
I'll tell you what, for a decade at least, having the number one seed, which is to say getting a bye in the playoffs, was huge. Those teams continually got to the Super Bowls from both the NFC and AFC. Last year, that didn't happen in the new structure with the one seed getting the bye. I wonder if it looms larger this year, if it returns to form that the team that gets the bye has an inside track. They do obviously have the inside track. If the Vikes get that number one seed and everything runs through Minnesota, look out for them. All right, let's move along here. Pete Rose, you've heard of him, right? Shazier, Ohio, and all that. He's MLB's all-time hit king. He's been kept out of the Hall of Fame for gambling on baseball games while he was the skipper of the Reds. This week, Rose wrote a letter to the commish, Rob Manfred, asking for forgiveness in hopes of getting into Cooperstown one day. 5-0. Rose is now 81 years old, and he's humbled himself, I guess, by writing this letter. But does he deserve a shot to come back and get into the Hall of Fame after all these years?
I'm going to be honest. Pete Rose is closer to your age, and not 81, but like you watched a little bit of him playing and a little bit of his coaching. So I'm going to throw this one back to you.
I mean, that's a little hurtful and unnecessary, and I don't think I'm that close in age to Peter Rose. But either way, listen, I've long bellyached about these halls of fame. They need to all be moved up to where they belong. Mount Pius, the inexact justice that is delivered. I mean, that I'm not just talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame. There are a lot of bad guys, people who didn't behave well as human beings, who are in their halls of fame, but we apply this new standard to them. Now, specifically, he bet on baseball. That's a no-no in any sport because it disrupts the integrity of the game. That being said, you're cutting your nose to spite your face if you're the Baseball Hall of Fame, keeping Pete Rose, a.k.a. the Hit King, out. Also, the Home Run King, Barry Bonds, is out. Maybe the best pitcher of the last half century, Roger Clemens, also not there. What father would say to his kid, let's go to the Hall of Fame and see the all-time greats when the all-time greats ain't even in there? It's very strange to me, the corner that these voters have backed themselves into. And it really steals from, talk about credibility. A Hall of Fame is supposed to be the best players in your sports history. That ain't what the Baseball Hall of Fame is now. That being said, I get that Peter Rose betting on baseball is not great for the credibility of the sport. Alex Pereira had an incredible comeback victory to steal the UFC middleweight title from Israel Adesanya at UFC 281 at Madison Square Garden. Pereira was losing in the final round, but pulled out the win via TKO in the final rounds. Shazier, if you hadn't played football, would you have given combat sports a shot?
If you're talking about combat sports like track, yeah. Basketball, yeah. Fighting, no. I feel, obviously, I would give myself like a 7.5 out of 10. And you're not punching my face. You know what I'm saying? I can't be a 4. I can't be a 5, Right. So, I would call myself a 10, but I need the listeners, to know that I'm realistic. So I'm going to give myself like a 7.5. And this face is too beautiful to punch. So I'm not really a comeback sport type of guy. I even practiced jiu-jitsu a few times. Like one of my mentors and best friends, he does jiu-jitsu. And he brought me to his coach and was like, hey, I'll teach you jiu-jitsu. I'm going to train you. And he was training me, and the coach was like, hey, Ryan, do you want to know what it's like to get choked? So if you get into a tournament or you try,
It's a weird question out of context.
No, but like the thing is, we was actually practicing like the triangle or whatever the move is. And because like you fold your hand and then you bend it like this, and then it's like the tighter you squeeze it or whatever, it like chokes people, right? So he was like, hey, do you want to see what it's like, because if you're going to be using it, you need to at least know what it feels like. So I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll try it out. And then he started to squeeze my neck, and I couldn't breathe. And I damn near almost passed out. And I tapped out before. And that guy has not been in my house ever since then. So I'm telling you, combat sports is not for me. I enjoy it. I like, Israel Adesanya when they fight. I like Khabib. I like watching Floyd. But I'm going to leave all that fighting to them. And I'm going to leave the football and all that type of stuff to me. So, I'm good on that.
Your old pal, Le'Veon Bell, likes getting in that ring, though. He likes throwing hands, old school boxing style. Atlanta Falcons guard, this is a neat story. Jake Matthews had to come back from the delivery room straight to the stadium after his wife had a baby just ahead of the Falcons Thursday night football game against the Panthers. Shazier, would you leave the hospital to play in the game, or would you stay there with your new baby and the missus and so on?
See, my draft class is built different. See, me and Jake Matthews are in the same draft class. And I see that he took the sacrifice of, hey, it's my time to, be there with my family, but then I also have to go play in this game. And me and my wife talked about this before. We said, hey, if we having a baby during the game, obviously if it's during the game, I'm not playing. But if we have the baby right before the game and we're in the same, if it's at UPMC, which is 10 minutes from the stadium, my wife understands I'm going to be at that game because Jake Matthews, he understands how important he is to that team. And to me, I just felt if I'm an important part to the team, if I'm trying to do what I can to help this team succeed, and it was a Thursday night game, so he understood after this Thursday night, I get the whole weekend with my family because the coach is probably not going to make him go in the next day. I get the whole weekend with my family, and they might be on a bye week as well. So I think that he understands that I'm going to just play in this game, and I'm going to get all the time I need with my family right after. So.
I mean, that's fine to answer it honestly, but for future reference, any professional athlete within the sound of my voice, this is a situation that is highly unlikely to arrive at your doorstep. Tell your wife, of course I would skip a mere football game to be with you in this precious moment. You're probably never going to have to actually do it. So say you're going to do the human thing, and then when the game arrives, you go play in the game because it's probably not going to happen anyway. See, Dameshek, one step ahead.
No, the Dameshek's one step ahead, but then if that situation happens, now you're stuck. So me and my wife talked about the situation before it happened. Hey, honey, if we're having a kid and it's actually during the game, then I'm going to stay. I'm going to be there for you. But if we have a kid and it's the same day of the game, I'm going to be there. But once our kid is born, if I can get back to the stadium by the time the game is going, I'm going to be playing.
All right. You have it your way. I think my way is more clever. And I like I say, what are the chances you're actually going to have a baby on game day? Come on. Highly unlikely. Look like the good guy in theory. And if you have to do it in practice, that's another matter. All right. Hey, listen, 5-0. Another gangbusters episode here of Don't Call It a Comeback. Let's wrap it up, shall we?
Make sure to follow, rate, review the show on whatever you're listening on. Check us out on YouTube on the Wondery channel, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any episodes. And we'll see you all next week.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.